Finally, Nigeria opens land, air borders with Niger Republic. African countries urged to put an end to natural resources-backed loans. Reps summon cement manufacturers overprice. And joining me to discuss these are Dr. Muda Yusuf, the CEO, CPPE, and Paul Alaje, Chief Economist, SPM Professionals. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Perpetua.
All right, I'd like to begin with you, Dr. Muda. I mean, just going over some of those sanctions again, I actually wonder how these countries fared and how badly trade and commerce would have been impacted. I mean, what could have been the worst, really? Dr. Muda, if you can hear me.
You know, Niger is a very poor country, even before the sanction. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I was saying that Niger is a very poor country. Even before the sanctions, you know, they have been grappling with a whole lot of issues.
Dr. Muda, if you can hear me, I'd like you to, you know...
Movement of goods, trade.
All right, okay. Paul, if you can hear me, I'd like you to, you know, go over that, talking about, you know, some of these sanctions that were imposed and the impact these sanctions had on all of the countries, really. Talk about Nigeria. I mean, people who are trading along the borders, they have their own stories to tell. What could have been the worst?
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning once again. I must say that the impact of the sanction on Niger was quite tremendous, not just on Nigeria and Niger, but on some other countries around us. First, you recall that there was a coup d'etat that took place in Niger, and ECOWAS, not Nigeria, ECOWAS have taken decision to isolate the countries that have been affected. In this case, Niger, because of proximity with Nigeria. Shortly after that, we saw acute shortage of grains in Nigeria. The truth is this: the relationship between Nigeria and Niger dates back into decades and, if you like, centuries, because there's high level of intermarriages and so on and so forth between the two countries, that's Nigeria and Niger. So when government came up with sanction and Niger retaliated by also saying Nigeria cannot fly across their border and so on and so forth, all of these have economic implication on the two countries. The first one is that the food shortage we saw in Nigeria, which of course is still also affected Niger. The volume of rice available in Nigeria, especially in the northern region, reduced significantly, coupled with the fact that there is high level of insecurity in the northern Nigeria. The stopgap measure that we have had, or the Niger market or output from Niger, always helped Nigeria to reduce the impact of this food shortage. But unfortunately, because that decision was made, which may not be totally wrong in itself, but when you consider the
you know what, Paul, I like what you just said now. Let me come in here, Paul. Let me come in here. You talked about the decision, you know, not totally being wrong, you know. Now, going back to why these sanctions were imposed in the first instance, those factors have still not changed. There is still no civilian rule in Niger. Now, doesn't that make ECOWAS, you know, maybe a toothless bulldog, really? Because at the end of the day, the purpose for which this was imposed wasn't achieved, and people were suffering, businesses were suffering, people, you know, couldn't go about their businesses and all of that.
Well, I must say that in the first instance, that the decision was not wrong does not really make it right. You know, government did it. ECOWAS took that decision to encourage civilian rule and to send strong signal against anyone that may want to take over in all other states. So it was a form of deterrent. But you see, ECOWAS also need to reconsider some of their decisions, not on people that are taking over from civilian rule, but also the economic life of different member states. Look at the quality of life in Nigeria. You can check what is going on in other ECOWAS states. From Ghana, check inflation, even though this is a global phenomenon. But here is it. How has ECOWAS countries helped their citizens to improve in terms of their living standard? How have they tried in terms of reducing cost of living for most of these countries? And if you check, one of the reasons why the coup plotter, one of the things they mentioned was that it became really tough for people in terms of living. That is why they felt it's important for them to take over. And what shocked me the most was the jubilation that came immediately after that country was taken over by the military junta. So here is, as much as you want to do what is right, you must also look at the context. Are your people willing to support you? And all other African leaders should also smell the coffee. It may come to a time when life and livelihood become so tough for people, such that people will not want to go back to their past by supporting those who they felt they have gained freedom of, the coup plotters. So for me, even though it's a right decision to say we don't want more military to take over territories, but the question is, currently that you are in charge of the economy, what is happening to exports? What is happening to poverty? What is happening to exchange rate? What is happening to unemployment? What is happening to inflation? These are answers that authorities must ensure they provide responses to in form that it will make quality of life to improve and it will make people to be better. If they don't, I'm afraid people may support what seems to us not to be very correct.
All right. I guess in essence, you're saying that ECOWAS should do much more. Well, let's leave that and get to some other conversations. Dr. Muda, thank you once again for being with us. Now, I'd like to talk about the AFDB boss, what he said. He's worried about how African countries back loans with natural resources. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Do you think this is something that's worrisome or, I mean, maybe a necessity, really?
Well,
Dr. Muda.
We have to look at the options. We have to look at the options available to each of the countries on the continent. One option is to borrow. The other option is to use whatever you have, like your resources, to be able to raise funds. Another option is also to make your assets available for investments, equity investments. These are the options available to many of the countries. Now, if you have resources that you can use to back up, to raise some funds, I don't see anything wrong with it. As long as such funds are utilized in a way to build the capacity of that economy to be able to recover very fast. Using the resources that you have to raise facility is better than going to borrow. Because borrowing at this time is also very, very costly, especially for a country like Nigeria. Because the terms of the credit are always very, very high because of the country risk issues and so on and so forth. And in any case, how many of these countries are able to have that credit worthiness to be able to raise facility at a very concessional rate? So if any country must even go for borrowing, we should be looking more at issue of concessionary facility, like the kind of facility you get from the multilateral organizations, the World Bank, ADB, bilateral sources, and so on. But if countries are going to take things from the Eurobond, for instance, it's extremely very expensive, very costly. So it's a question of looking at the options available to countries and look at which ones will suit the country better. So it's not in all cases.
Okay. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Using your resources to raise facility is a bad thing.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. I'd like to get your thoughts on this, Paul Alaje, and I want to also take us back to that particular conversation where he raised concerns. He talked about, undue dominance and there's skewed terms, and he also talked about wrong pricing because some of these natural resources are not really well priced and all of that. So, Paul, let me get you. Do you share the same sentiment with, additional?
Well, I must say that to a large extent, using our resources to borrow, it is wrong. We cannot sustain it. We have tried it over the years. It has brought us on our knees. You can check what we are getting in revenue today. I think it's high time we tell those who are laid back in office to get serious. If you are the president of a nation, you are the chief economist of that nation. If you are the governor of a state, you are the chief economist of the state. If you have not figured out how your people will live and how you make life better for them, why come to office in the first instance? So we cannot, what will happen to all the resources? And Nigeria is expected to export about 2.3 million barrels of crude per day. What are we doing currently? We cannot even secure what we have. And out of what we have, because we want easy way out, we want quick fixes. we are giving the part of the resources out as mortgaging our future. So here is it. I completely align with Mr. Adesina on this. I align with him. If you must provide leadership for a nation or for a people, your job is not just your expenditure. You must also be concerned about your revenue. Let me ask, what is happening to lithium that is available in Nigeria? What is happening to gold and other natural resources that is available in Nigeria? Nigeria has a private sector. Why can't we provide adequate power supply? As I talk to you, where I'm speaking from is running on generator. And we want development. From all the monies that we are giving out or resources we have pledged in order for us to have revenue for them today, what happens? Have we even considered price variation? And things that may happen tomorrow. We mustn't pursue economics of convenience, which is what we are doing now.
Okay, Paul, let me come in here.
That it may not be convenient for us.
Let me come in here, Paul. Let me come in here, Paul, now. Based on what, all right. Based on what Doctor was saying, he was talking about a situation where you don't even have options or the options seem limited and then you're pressed for time. What do you do? I remember when Nigeria also took its own prepayment deal with Afrexim Bank. At that point, the reserves was nothing to write home about, even though we're told we have up to 33 trillion and all of that, But looking at all of these things, don't you think that there might be times you have to probably just do certain things and just hope that things do not go all right?
So here is it. If you continue to give the argument of there are no options or the time is limited, we will never solve our own problem. Economics have so many principles or theories that are based on assumptions. When it comes to implementing the same in Nigeria, we forget that the assumptions are not particularly the same. I'll give you an instance. Comparative cost advantage. It is easy for us to say today Nigeria does not have comparative cost advantage in producing maybe rice or in producing maybe steel or so on and so forth. When the world was created, no country has comparative cost advantage over others. Separately build nations where comparative cost advantage is available. We must, as a matter of fact, build the comparative cost advantage.
Thank you so much, Paul.
They are possible.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to bring in Dr. Muda here. I'd like to bring in Dr. Muda here because you've said a lot of things. Dr. Muda, I'd like to get your thoughts and add to that. Looking at Nigeria's deal, are you scared or do you worry that something might just go wrong along the line? Looking at the deal we currently have, we know some persons have talked about the fact that there's no transparency in the deal. Some persons have asked questions as to the details, and all of that. Let me get your thoughts, Doctor, before we move on.
Well, I think we need to interrogate the issue of the transparency. I've been reading a few things online about the costs, what is costing us, what we are paying as commission and all of that. A bit of that is in public domain, but I think that should be within the framework that will make sure that the country itself is not shortchanged. I think that's extremely very critical. I'm not sure that these things have been subjected to any rigorous interrogation, by either the public or other independent issue, but we need to worry about the terms and conditions.
Okay.
Those terms and conditions are extremely very important to ensure that the country is not being shortchanged. That is very, very important. Then the amount and the degree of exposure is also important. We should not commit ourselves to a situation where a substantial amount of resources are committed upfront. I agree with what Paul said. I mean, there's a limit to which you can expose yourself, especially in an environment that's so volatile that things are changing, very rapidly. So the interest of the country has to be taken into account, and these things need to be done very, very cautiously, and the details need to be properly examined so that the country is not shortchanged. That is extremely very important.
All right, Doctor, just before we go, I'd like you to talk about this. The House of Reps has summoned cement manufacturers for what is described as arbitrary increase in the price of cement. Do you see anything coming out of that? Dr. Muda?
Well, I think I had some of the comments. I had some of the comments on the floor of the House. I think we need to be very careful the way we also talk about investors, the way we condemn them publicly and so on. It is better in an inflationary environment. Prices are changing every time. If you look at cement, cement is energy intensive. You use a lot of energy for purposes of producing cement. You also need a lot of logistics. So when you look at cost of logistics and cost of energy, they are huge. These are huge components of the cost of production of cement. I'm not saying that there is no possibility of exploitation and things like that, but it is good to listen to them first, before we rush into judgment. Because I saw some pronouncements judging them, saying that they're exploitative, they are this, they are that. I don't think that is fair, especially for those who are in production. Production is one of the most difficult things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
So if you find investors who are into production, I think rather than just condemn them outright, I will need to listen to their own story. That is my view.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Muda Yusuf, for sharing your thoughts with me today on Business Edge.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul Alaje, for sharing your thoughts also with me.